How's it going, everyone? Today we're here going over a full body power phase training program for a boxer. It is advised that many of these movements could be modified based on the status of your athlete or the performance of your athlete. To begin with, we're going to be working on some skiers, just making sure that we're raising our heart rate, making sure our body's warm, going into our warm-up. To begin with, we're going with a stagger stance with a cross overreach. The main focus on this movement is making sure we're getting deep into that stretch, increasing hamstring stress, making sure we're recruiting all the hamstring muscles going into our workout for the day. Up next, we got a good morning with a wide reach. The main purpose of this exercise is to activate our lower trapezoids in order to manage our scapula. Why? Because we are going to be doing some power cleans and we are going to be benching throughout our workout for the day. Next, we're going to go into our good morning with a T-reach, still working on some internal rotator stretch, just making sure we don't create any impingement throughout the day, our training program as well as our training phase. Up next, we're going to go into a reverse lunge with a single arm overhead reach. The main reason we are incorporating this stretch is in order to target our hip flexors, our iliopsoas to be more specific, and get a good stretch on our lat muscles, as we are going to be progressing into some neutral grip pull-ups for the day. Up next, we're going to be going into some lateral ground sweeps. The main purpose of this is to activate both our ab and adductors and get a lower back stretch. As you see here, we're going lateral, staying within that same movement, frontal plane, arching our lower back, getting a good round in our lower back, making sure we are getting a good stretch. Last but not least, we have a frog step back with a trunk abduction. The purpose of this is not only to stretch the hip flexor, but also get a rotation at our trunk, as we are going to be doing some band pullover with rotations. Up next, still managing our shoulder area. We're getting a 90-90 external rotation with the wide press. This variation could be done when doing an overhead press, but for the most part, the reason we're doing this movement is because our boxers tend to have rounded shoulders, so we're making sure we're stressing our external rotators, strengthening it. As a boxing athlete, you could focus and get a lot of shoulder injuries due to the nature of the sport. Up next, last but not least, we're going to be recruiting our hamstring muscles again, just getting a single leg variation of a leg curl, keeping it simple using a med ball. Up next, we're going to go into our push-up with a Y reach. The reason we're doing this, once again, just incorporating, recruiting our external rotators, but at the same time getting a push-up variation. So it's a good combination exercise, prepping our body going into our press, horizontal press for the day. Up next, we got some neuro preps. This is my favorite. Get my heart rate up, get my body ready to go, activate my central nervous system. As you can see, the purpose of this is to get triple extension. To be more specific, get extension at both the knee and the hip. Up next, we're going to get some switches at the hip flexors. The purpose of this is to make sure we're getting lengthening at the hip flexors. Last but not least, some ballistic burpees, a variation of both the push-up and activating our hip flexors, as we are going to be doing some Bulgarian split squats. Here we got a variation of our box jumps. This is a progression into my neuro prep. The reason I'm doing this is to get power output, making sure I am exposing my body to high power production. Within this clean cycle, it's noted that it's very important to know if your athlete is capable of catching a barbell. In the sport of boxing, we obviously use our hands for the sport itself, since it is a contact sport. So there might be a world where you would not want your athlete to catch the barbell. However, for the purposes of this video, we are going to catch the barbell to demonstrate the clean cycle. For a boxer, you might want to just keep it simple into a clean pull or a high pull, and do your reverse lunges with either regular back load or with dumbbells or with the Hatchfield squat. Here we're going to be progressing into our power clean progression. Doing our power phase, there could be an opportunity that our athlete has progressed from a clean pull to a high pull, from a hand clean, a hand high pull, and into a power clean. I first start off with a 3-position hand clean all the way down, and then progress into a power clean. Here we're touching a heavy load as it is a power phase, so we were working at 90% of a 1 rep max. Furthermore, we're going to go into our lower body contrast set. Here we got a Bulgarian split squat, keeping it relatively light, working at about 75% of a 1 rep max, and then doing our contrast set, going into a single leg tuck jump. I'll tell you what, man, these are very challenging, but very good if you are trying to get good contrast work and get a good rate of force development. So once again, Bulgarian split squat, and then progressing over into our single leg tuck jump. It's very important. I would always recommend starting with our weaker leg, and then from there getting a rest, and then going into our other leg. Up next, we got a single arm bench press, particularly with the dumbbells. The reason I did this is to challenge stability. As you can see within the video, there's often times that my opposite foot tries to come off the ground as I am going into a single leg movement and going relatively heavy. I typically like to pair my upper body with 2 or 3 different movements. Here we're going to be going bench press with a neutral grip pull-ups, just making sure we're getting that good lengthening at the lat muscles, and then pairing up with our third exercise, which will be a band pull-off with a rotation. Very good exercise to work on your core muscles, the internal obliques, as well as our abdominal muscles, as we're getting a good rotation, something that you see a lot within the sport of boxing itself. So we're going fast and then controlling all the way back into a neutral stance. Last but not least, love to work on the hamstrings, finishing off with some Nordics here. As you can see, we're using a band. This is a good variation if your athlete is still learning or getting more better at the movement itself. Control it. The lighter the band, the more resistance the athlete actually has to do within their hamstring itself. Good variation you could do if you want to progress it to the athlete. You could obviously remove the band or even start introducing a manual resistance leg curl to your athlete. Last but not least, finishing off with our cool down. Here we're doing some pronated angels. The purpose of this exercise is to recruit our scapular muscles as well as our rotator cuffs, our rhomboids, and our traps, all muscles that were used within the actual power clean itself. Following up next, we're going to go into a deep sumo squat with a upper back turn, just getting some trunk rotation, working on that transverse plane, getting to that deep squat movement pattern, as we might be working on some squats on the next day of strength training. Up next, we're going to be working on some banded scapular rotations. I'm a huge fan of this movement, especially using a band. It's going to allow me to get into a deeper trunk abduction, opening it all the way up, getting a good transverse movement within my thoracic spine. Love working on some thoracic spine movements. Last but not least, just holding a static stretch to not only stretch my quad muscle on the leg that's being bent in the back, but as well as my hip flexor, as we did work on some Bulgarian split squats, and it does put a lot of stress on the hip flexors itself. And then to top it all off, we're going to be working on some dead hangs, just decompressing the spine after loading our back with the Bulgarian split squats, as well as catching the barbell. Good variation, good movement to relax the body and decompress fully.